Good morning. Our presentation on Toni Bambara is Two Kinds of Revolution. I'm Michael Phan.
I'm Dogma Heidel.
I'm not Rich.
I'm Jacob Ward.
I'm Zuckerberg.
So Toni Bambara was born Miltona Merkin Cade. When she was 5, she changed her name to Toni. And then in 1970, she changed her name to Toni Cade Bambara. So Bambara is the name of a West African ethnic group. And she discovered the name after finding it on her great-grandmother's notebook. So to honor this newly found part of her heritage, she added Bambara to her name. Toni Bambara was most well known for her books, so we'll be discussing these books, as well as a posthumous work, These Bones Are Not My Child, which was published after she died of cancer in 1995. Toni Bambara also did a lot of film, activism, and teaching. She was a professor, particularly with film, English literature, and Afro-American studies.
So, in the kind of beginning years of Bambara's life, she took a lot of influence from her upbringing in urban areas and from the women in her family. So, she grew up in the urban areas in New York and New Jersey. Harlem especially had a great influence on her with the rich culture and heritage of Black arts movements, Harlem Renaissance, being exposed to artists such as Langston Hughes and Gwendolyn Brooks at a young age. And you can see sort of the influence that the city had on her in a lot of her books, and it manifests itself in her setting a lot of times is in cities, especially Harlem, and a lot of the short stories we're going to talk about today. And also in just this deep sense of Black community and Black pride. And then another thing that sort of is unique to her is her use of street talk, or the Black vernacular. So for her, it kind of makes like her workflow, and it makes it more accessible and relatable for her audience, because it sounds like a real person talking to you versus you just reading prose. And then in terms of the women in her family, Michael touched on her great-grandmother's notes impacting her name, but her mother was also a big influence, because she believes that her children had not only the right to dream, but they had to, the imperative, they had to be able to dream and think and be able to sort of get out of their circumstances and see the world around them. This quote where she dedicates the salt eaters to her mother, it shows the importance that her mother actually values the idea of daydreaming. She thinks it's serious work. And so Toni actually took that into account when she writes all her books and arguments, because her mother basically said that, showed her that everyone deserves fairness, and encouraged her to express this creatively. So it's important to kind of see the two social movements that Toni Bambara pulled her opinions from. And so first, it's kind of the Black Power movement. So in 1964, after the Civil Rights Act was passed, the Assistant Secretary of Labor under LBJ says that basically the fight's not over. We need to analyze what we can do that's more. And so he writes this report that's published in 1965, and it's came to be called the Moynihan Report because of its high controversy. So though it's well intended, he says the issue is the dynamic of the Negro family. Black families are in basically disrepair, and that's why there's so much inequality. And he cites specifically that there's a high percentage of single mother families in the Black community, and it's emasculating the Black male youth. And so a lot of the Black power groups at the time, the Panthers, Black nationalists, they said, we agree with that. That makes sense. We need to basically push the women aside and make room for the Black male, what Moynihan calls the strut, the Black male strut. So basically sort of like a peacocking of Black male power. And then on the other side of things, there is feminism. A lot of Black women, what they didn't find in the Black power movements, they wanted to see if they could find it in the feminist movement. But they found that it was too narrow. The feminist movement was majority ruled by white women who already had the education and resources to sort of make these claims to their own rights to their own body and rights to abortion and things like that. But the Black women, they wanted to focus on more systemic issues that affected women of color, such as welfare, accessibility to health care, and education. which would eventually raise up their class and also create a better environment for everyone.
So that leads us into our thesis, which is Bambara characterizes youthful black women in her fiction as strong-willed and morally active to convey her vision of black feminism where black women provide the driving force for social change. So I encourage you to read this quote, but I want to draw your attention to one thing in specifically, which is a lot of what she talks about in her stories, she's focusing on young black girls who are successful despite their adversity. So she's bringing in a lot of adversity, but she's combining it with this black woman's success. So let's talk about Gorilla My Love, which was published in 1972 and is a compilation of short stories, but I'm going to be specifically talking about the short story itself, Gorilla My Love. So it focuses on Hazel, who's a young black girl, and she's riding in the car with her uncle, grandfather, and younger brother. And they're discussing how her uncle is going to change his name in order to get married. And they're showing pictures and other things like this. And it brings back, and these pictures bring back a memory for Hazel of going to the movie with her younger brother. So they go to see the movie Gorilla My Love, which is about a gorilla. And when they get to the movie theater, they're shown a religious picture. And Toni brings in this comical scene where they're throwing potato chips at this religious movie in the theater because they want to see a movie about a gorilla. And then she starts to complain to the manager, and she actually doesn't get a refund. So she sets a candy store on fire, and it shuts down the movie theater for a week. And then later on in the story, Hazel is complaining to her uncle that she's upset with him because back when she was 3, he promised her that she would marry her, or he would marry her. And so this idea that Toni Cade Bambara is establishing in this story, although it seems kind of surface level, what she's looking at is 2 separate ideas. One is strong moral conviction and also self-confidence. So she's looking at Hazel and she's exploring Hazel's actions. And so Hazel decides that, I'm going to stand up for what I believe is right, which is I'm paid to see a movie and I'm going to see that movie, and she wants a refund if she doesn't get that. And also her uncle made her a promise, and she expects him to hold up to that promise. So this is something that Toni Cade Bambara explores, in that she wants black feminism to establish these ideas in their movements. She wants them to be strong-willed and not back down from oppression, and also to stand up against hypocrisy, because a lot of the times in the civil rights movement it was so focused on men that oftentimes black women would be left to the side, and she saw this as hypocritical, because if we're fighting for the rights of everyone, then we should also include black women. So that's why she's fighting so much for black feminism. So Muther is a critic. He's talking about how this story applies to the other stories in Gorilla My Love, the compilation, and this young black girl attitude Bambara explores. But it's not just limited to age. So she also explores older women and women of every age, but she's exploring this youthful attitude that they have of self-confidence and moral conviction. And then also, women are not going to be the ones, she talks about how women are not going to be the ones who step aside. They're going to be the ones who step up and discuss civil rights for not just themselves, but for everyone of the black community. And that's why this work is so important, is because it's exploring that idea in a very accessible way.
Next, we have a short story published by Bambara in the 90s called Raymond's Run. And the Raymond's Run is told from the perspective of Hazel Elizabeth Deborah Parker, a young girl in 60s Harlem, who she's nicknamed Squeaky for her high-pitched voice. And Bambara tells the story from Squeaky's perspective to really bring light to some of the other types of social inequalities that exist, such as gender and disability, because Squeaky was responsible for caring for her younger brother, who was disabled with Down syndrome. And this is strengthened by the quote at the bottom by Champion, where it's reinforced by the idea that Bambara advocates for the equality for everyone and not just individuals. And throughout the story, Squeaky is obsessed with beating her rival Gretchen, and but she comes to a realization when they actually have a race between them. And although Squeaky actually officially wins the race, she realizes something more important, something bigger than her, and that's training her brother. Because she notices that although she actually wins the race, she noticed that her brother was running alongside them, and she realized that he had great potential to be a great runner. And Bambara uses Squeaky in this sense to symbolize the force for change for everyone, and not just a few individuals. And this idea is reinforced by the quote by Champion at the bottom, where they mentioned that Bambara advocates community efforts for blacks as a whole and not just individuals.
All right, next we have the novel Those Bones Are Not My Child. It is one of Bambara's posthumous works. The quote reads, "There's terrorism right here in Atlanta. Atlanta I'm talking about, the new international city." This quote shows the irony in the terrorism against black people in it being rampant in their ideal metropolis. Atlanta at the time was heralded as a safe haven for blacks and for black progression. The book itself analyzes the corruption in Atlanta through the eyes of a black mother, Zola Spencer, from the years 1979 to 1982. Zola's son has recently been added to the list of murders of young black children within Atlanta. The police and leadership of Atlanta are not taking the investigation very seriously, or outright ignoring the issue as something that's being prevalent. They essentially say that, it's not terrorism, it's not that big of a deal. It's just another thing that's involved in cities. Bambara showcases the black woman's qualities of determination and headstrongness, and shows that it can push for justice for all black people. She also shows that femininity has a great strength rather than a weakness, pushing the idea for provision of black feminism, black women, having the capability to incite change. The fraudulent investigation as a common thread for all people can be seen as kind of a window for everyone to relate to. When all people can relate to this story, they begin to see that what black women are capable of is what they wish they would have done in that situation. In this, Bambara empowers black women and shows that she is capable of being a leader in society and leaders in social change.
Lastly, we have a short story called The Lesson. So The Lesson is about Sylvia. She's a young African-American girl who likes to have fun and spend time with the other children in her urban community, particularly Sugar, her childhood friend. And they are not really attentive to the bigger picture. They don't really want to or care about seeing the injustices that are going on outside their community. So there's a neighborhood woman named Miss Moore who wants to change that. She wants to educate them on how unfair the world is. And every week she gives them these lessons or these lectures, hence the title of The Lesson. One week Miss Moore takes them to the rich white majority part of town and she brings them into a toy shop for the kids to see just how expensive the toys are. When Miss Moore asks them what they learn after they get out of the toy shop, Sugar actually contributes her opinion. She actually comments, equal chance to pursue happiness means an equal crack at the dough. And Sylvia is initially furious that Sugar dragged out the lesson and gave Miss Moore material because Sylvia doesn't like Miss Moore. In fact, no one likes Miss Moore. But this series of events actually starts to open Sylvia's eyes. Even though she doesn't want to admit it, she can feel something inside herself that starts to make her think. This is about a major turning point in how a young black girl views the world. First off, Toni Bambara subtly shows that even if Sylvia is naive, she's observant and strong enough to understand societal problems. So I'm going to read a quote. This is after she sees a clown toy that costs $35. Who are these people that spend that much for performing clowns and $1,000 for toy sale votes? What kind of work they do, and how they live, and how come we ain't enrolled? Now, there could have been people during the time period of the lesson within the black community who would have said to Miss Moore, or who would have said to any member of the black community trying to take young black girls out on weekly lessons to teach them about injustices, that even though it's well-intentioned, there's no point. For example, instead, take my sons out, take your neighbor's sons out. Don't take the little girls out because they're not the ones who will lead this community. They don't have the attitude necessary for that. But Sylvia is able to prove that wrong. Her attitude, even if it's not quite there, even if it's not quite educated or mature, it's still strong enough to be able to lead a movement. The lesson shows us black feminism taking root. When you read the lesson, you can tell that something big has started in Sylvia's mind. Toni Bambara's works like to focus on the power and the rigidity of black feminism. The lesson is able to show us where that power and rigidity come from, how it gets started, and because we're seeing this from Sylvia's perspective, that makes this a lot more obvious.
So, sort of to wrap this all up, we mentioned Bambara's idea of black feminism, but through her works, what exactly does it mean? In another work that was published in 1970, a Black Women Anthology, she calls her message Two Kinds of Revolution, hence the name of our presentation. And so what she's talking about is she merges black militancy, black power movements, and the feminist movement to say that black women are beautiful and powerful and that they should not be constrained to these roles that society's traditionally been putting them in. And so to the black women specifically, she's trying to make them realize their own identities, that she says, look at us, we're so great, we can do these amazing things. And so how does she do this specifically? She uses these youthful black women to basically highlight the qualities of world changers at their grassroots when they're just starting out, to show the potential that black women have to change the world.
And to think about the impact, it's important to see how this vision has continued today. So she believed that black girls would change the world, and black women have changed the world. So we have a couple examples, Michelle Obama, Beyonce, the starters of the Black Lives Matter movement. These black women have truly made impacts about how we view our own society, how we view politics, how we view pop culture. And that's the importance of studying Toni Cade Bambara. She's showing how all of this movement and all of this vision can come to fruition, and this is the example of it coming to fruition. So thank you so much for listening to our presentation.